Hello everyone, Alistair Gold here. As you can tell, different surroundings. I'm not at home, I am abroad, trying to get some quick days away in Turin in Italy. But I felt that there was a little gap today that I could quickly fire out a video just on some things that have happened and have a very quick look at the Bournemouth game as well. Obviously, I should stress right from the start, things move so quickly in the transfer window, especially right now in these final days. Things can happen with players going out, things can happen with players potentially coming in. So of course, all of this, by the time I even hit publish on it, it will take an hour or two to actually publish. Things could have already have moved on. I may try and put out a little video short or something if they do. That's the problem with the transfer market, unfortunately, especially when it gets to this stage. Things can fall apart so quickly, honestly. Everything we're pretty much going to talk about, there are so many different variables and factors to them all, which could go either way. So yeah, it's not going to be a long one today, just a shorter one, just to quickly kind of update on some little bits and pieces, because I've had lots of people asking me, why no video, where are you? Hey, it's a good thing that I'm not around. Normally that means things are happening, and to be honest, there are a couple of things starting to kind of bubble away, so hey, maybe it's had an effect in some way. If I've helped out in some aspect, that's all I can potentially do for you all. I think the only place to start really is Brennan Johnson. You might have seen yesterday I put out a little bit just saying that I just kind of was going back and forth yesterday with various people involved in various parts of potential deal that could happen here. And yeah, essentially got the information, as you would have seen, maybe, that I put out there, that Brennan Johnson is Ange Postecoglou's #1 attacking target for the remainder of this transfer window. He just apparently feels that he's the perfect fit for his system. Obviously very fast, tricky kind of player, really, I guess. It's a young player with a high ceiling, lots of upside to him and what he can do. Talks have now taken place. I think I saw actually just before I came on here, Fabrizio Romano was talking about a bid having been made and rejected, £43 million plus add-ons and sell-on clause. So we'll see where that goes. Like I say, a bid like that pretty much reflects exactly what I'm saying there, that this is a player that Postecoglou feels fits what he wants. Interesting. After I put that info out there, I had some people, some people are always going to doubt stuff, and that's absolutely understandable. That's kind of the way I guess we should be in life, is always doubtful of everything and, questioning things. I guess that's what sometimes makes the world a better place. But some of the questions about this were, this is classic, the club trying to buy someone, the club putting out there that Postecoglou wants him. That doesn't work at all in that aspect, because I can imagine the club would be very unhappy, probably, or not very unhappy, but I don't think the club would be best pleased that I'm putting out there that Postecoglou really wants him. That wouldn't really make any sense, because let's say Spurs don't get him and the information is out there, because this is a tough deal to do, honestly. I should stress this. We'll discuss exactly why in a moment, but if they were unable to get Postecoglou's top target for the attacking sense, how does that look? It doesn't look great. It doesn't look great. So it's not the kind of information that Spurs would willingly put out there into the ether. Why would they want people to know about the main? Why would they want Forest to know? Everything I'm saying here, now I'm starting to think, was it a good idea to put it out there? But you know what I mean. It's not really for me to question such things. I guess it's for me to just kind of report on what I know and what I can get confirmed from multiple sources, which is the way I always do these things. So yeah, I just thought that was a funny one, that the idea that the club would put that out there, because that could absolutely backfire on them. It's the kind of thing that you say maybe afterwards, if I'm thinking with like a PR kind of head on, if you sign a player, then say afterwards perhaps he's the main man that the manager wanted. You probably don't do it when the deal is, I think it'll be in the balance. I think that's the only way you can kind of look at it now. And the reason I say that is because of the two chairmen involved. American actors at Forest, and obviously he's the owner more than chairman, and Daniel Levy, of course, at Tottenham. You're essentially getting two people together. It's a bit like Orlas at Lyon and Daniel Levy in the past, having kind of tried to do business before. It's people that are quite, what's the politest way of putting that? I don't want to say difficult to deal with, although technically that's out there. Many people have said that about Daniel Levy in terms of negotiating and it being a painful process. Let's say, in a polite way, two people that want the very best for their club, and they are going to do everything to make that the case. So it is going to be painstaking. Everything I'm hearing is this could go right to the wire. It could go to the very end. And you know, when I put out there in my tweet yesterday about this being a tough deal to do, people understandably said, well, just whack in the money that they want. And all indications are they're wanting around the £50 million mark. And obviously we had there the 43 million bid that sounds like it's been rejected for Richarlison, putting that out there. Obviously, again, I am technically on holiday, so I haven't really been chasing every single angle. Just any bits of information that I get, I'm trying to put out there for everyone so that I can at least play my bit in keeping people informed as I can. But 50 million is a lot of money. And again, how that would be structured, I think, would have to be a very different thing. I don't think it would be 50 million up front. I don't think it's as simple as saying whack £50 million down on the table, because I like Brennan Johnson. I think he's really good. If you listen to the podcast Guesty and I did the other day, both of us very much are firmly can kind of see exactly where Postecoglou can turn Brennan Johnson from a good young prospect into a superb player at Tottenham Hotspur. He has got a lot of talent there as well. I've spoken to various people around Forest, and it's interesting. There is a variety of opinions. There is some people saying that he's got a really high ceiling and that he can become this player that we're all I've just spoken about. There's some people saying that he maybe just relies on his pace. You talk to some Forest fans and they absolutely adore him, and they actually think, you know, you're really going to have to replace the goals and assists to his game as well. And I think people maybe are underestimating how difficult it is he was 21 years old when he first came into the Premier League last season. Came in as a player who isn't naturally playing up front. You know, he can play as a support player, he can play support striker, he can play on the right, he can actually play on the left as well. Yet he's managed 10 goals in his first season of Premier League. I think maybe 8 in the Premier League, 2 in another competition. I can't remember the exact breakdown now. And 2 or 3 assists as well. So for a young player, having come up from the Championship, where he's scored a lot of goals in that promotion-winning season for Forest, but to make that leap into the Premier League and still get there fairly consistently on the score sheet for such a young player, I don't think you can overestimate that. And I think some people maybe that are disappointed in the idea are potentially because they're so excited about young talents like, let's say, Gift Orban, a year younger. It's a very difficult way, I think, sometimes to look at this. I understand people looking at Gift Orban and thinking, what an incredible young talent, because I think he is. I think he is a terrific young talent. What I would also say about him, and this is very much echoed by people I speak to who cover the Belgian league, is he's very untested. He's very raw. So while a compilation of his goals that we can watch from the Belgian league looks amazing, would he be able to score those same goals in the Premier League? That's an entirely different thing. And also, how would he deal with the physicality of the Premier League? That's another thing that have been some question marks about him. Whereas I guess when you look at Brennan Johnson, different kind of player. I'd say Gift Orban is maybe more naturally works through the centre, whereas with Brennan Johnson, we've seen him maybe more out on the flank, especially I think right flank last season. But obviously can play centrally and on the left. But with Brennan Johnson, it's kind of more ready-made. We know he can score in the Premier League. We know he can do these things when he was just 21, now 22. So it's a bit more of a known quantity. So that's why you're seeing a different price tag in Gift Orban. They're talking about 30 to 35 million I've seen out there. And with Brennan Johnson, we're talking about 50. And it's that extra £15 million, which is essentially valuing his readiness for the Premier League, I guess. And the other aspect, of course, of all of it is how just insane the transfer market values are now. They are absolutely mad. Some of that is, I'd imagine, the Chelsea spending. I'd imagine there's plenty to it, to be honest. some people maybe would say a Declan Rice deal. I really like Declan Rice, and I can kind of see why he'd be worth that figure, but I think some of the Chelsea figures have been mad. Obviously, there's the Saudi kind of exodus now and the money that's brought in, so I think naturally a lot of the price is being inflated right now. And also the other angle I should also say about Brennan Johnson, of course, is that there's the Brentford aspect. Brentford also trying to sign him. Brentford, obviously, it's much difficult. I was about to say Brentford probably can offer him a more regular start, whereas at Spurs he would have to kind of really have a fight and competition to try and get one of those places. I do wonder if you were to bring in Brennan Johnson, whether Sonny would maybe... I'm not saying, again, sometimes people get very upset when you suggest that someone is going to make Sonny move, but Postecoglou has spoken about Sonny playing through the centre, and I do wonder whether if Richarlison, we're going to talk about Richarlison a little bit about the match at Bournemouth, and if Richarlison isn't impressing, then Sonny, I think, is a very good central option for Postecoglou and actually could score a lot of goals, because something, as we've said before about the Postecoglou system, is that the crosses that often come into the box are low ones. They're not higher ones. With Sonny, obviously Sonny scored the odd goal from a header anyway, but mainly we know his strength lies on the ground. And if the system is tailored around getting these low balls into the box to attack lower down with your feet, I do think Sonny could absolutely mop up with goals in that scenario as well. So maybe that would be a thinking of Sonny going through the middle, and then you could bring in Johnson into the front line, whether it be on the left or on the right to the Kulusevski. And I think Perisic has had a really good little contribution so far this season as well. You've got Manor Solomon as well. Brian Hill, we'll have to see exactly what happens with him and whether he is able to get a move, if he does get a move. Technically still out injured, but I haven't had it ruled out exactly that he might still head off. It depends on what offers are out there, I guess, and how much the player does want to make sure he gets regular football. But I do wonder that with Brennan Johnson. And then, as I say, Brennan Johnson also provides you with the option of playing through the centre as well. So I do feel like some people are maybe underestimating how he could work within the setup at Spurs. And I think the most important thing for me out of all of it is that Postecoglou wants him. And if Postecoglou wants him right now, Postecoglou can do no wrong, quite frankly, can he? He's got all of us eating out of his hands right now, and that's the journalists. I see that the TV broadcasters now are starting to really love him as well. You know, he had that little funny kind of 8 minutes or so on the sofa for TNT Sports after the game, which we'll have a little talk about later. That went down well. You know, you've got people like Robbie Williams singing about him now as well, and if everything is going his way right now and he wants a player, and he said this before, nobody can better judge how a player will work in his system than him. And if he said, I want Brennan Johnson, Spurs kind of have to then back their manager. And I guess when it comes to the fans are always saying back the manager. So if Postecoglou wants his player, oh, and by the way, after saying last week, I'm so certain I'm going to say Pochettino instead of Postecoglou at some point because they're slightly sounding similar. Apparently I did. I apologise for that. Someone said that I did at one point in it call Postecoglou Pochettino. It is going to happen over the coming months, hopefully years, because that would suggest that Postecoglou is going to stick around for a long time. But obviously I spent a long time reporting on Mauricio Pochettino, so his name is going to fall in there sometimes. But yeah, so you've got fans saying, you know, back the manager. Then when the manager wants a player that maybe they're not too keen on, maybe it's back the manager, but not in this instance. But I understand it. I understand that everyone has a different views on players. They have a different views on transfers they'd like to see. Because another key element of this is it clearly suggests that if he wants Brennan Johnson as his number one attacking target, that pretty much clarifies what he said, to be fair, publicly, and what we kind of were led to believe anyway, that perhaps they weren't looking for a straight number 9 type to come in anyway. And I know there's a lot of fans that want to see another 9 come in, and that probably is also geared around the fact that Richarlison has not been particularly great thus far. So yeah, I think it's all kind of wrapped up in that little ball of frustration. But what I would say is, yeah, I think if anyone has earned, just in a couple of months, to be given a player that he really wants, I think Maddison was one of them. another player that he really wanted as well, and also Van de Ven as well, by the sounds of it. So you kind of have to, Spurs have to go out and get him. Like I said right at the top of this, it's kind of on Spurs to make this happen really now, and from a club that, you know, are going to hardball here. They're going to play the Spurs game back at Spurs. They know Spurs want him. They are going to have to, obviously there'll be a fine balance, maybe where Postecoglou even says at some point, it's like, okay, well I want him, but I don't want him just if it's going to be silly money and we kind of lose money that would go to other areas, because they also want a centre-back. They do. He said that to me out in Barcelona. I asked him straight off the bat, do you want another centre-back on top of Mickey van der Ven? He said, yeah, potentially. Yeah, I do. That's an area that I would like someone else. Very roughly paraphrasing. Have a look back at the quotes. But, yeah, so that's what I mean. I've seen Ansu Fati as well from Barcelona linked, and he's an interesting one, because obviously very young, was seen as the next superstar, and then he had some absolutely horrendous, I was looking back at the injuries he had over those couple of seasons, which absolutely ravaged those campaigns for him. And then for some reason last season, Xavi just didn't really fancy him at all. And so he's gone from being the next big star to being a player that, to be honest, Barcelona I don't think would be that devastated to let go. Which maybe says a fair bit about it. And then I think maybe as journalists and fans, we kind of see that and think, oh, what a star kind of thing. And yeah, it's not to say he wouldn't be terrific at Spurs, but maybe there's a little bit more to it, and there's got to be a reason why Xavi just doesn't fancy him at all. And obviously his numbers have not been fantastic around his injuries, but there's also the element, of course, of a player coming back from injuries and not looking as sharp. But pretty much if they end up getting someone else other than Brennan Johnson in an attacking slot, then they haven't really got the guy that, from what I understand, is the man that Postecoglou wants. So let's see how that works out over these next few days. Honestly, everyone that's spoken about it said it's going to be a very difficult deal to do, because City aren't desperate to let him go. They do want to, I think, still try to make some additions to their Forest. Did I say City? Forest. Don't really want to let him go, but they do want to make some additions to their squad. So they are, at some point, going to have to decide. And obviously, if the player makes his decision as well, it seems to be a suggestion that if it came down to Brentford and Spurs, that he would love to be coached. But I mean, you know, if Postecoglou wants you and he's kind of wowing everyone, and you've got people like Maddison raving about him, Sonny's raving about him, some of these big Premier League players are saying what a terrific... I mean, honestly, you won't find a player at Spurs right now, especially ones in that starting lineup and subs, that aren't raving about what Postecoglou's doing, not only on the pitches and kind of in the corridors of Hotspur Way and just the way he talks to them in these little measured moments, but also the training that he's kind of freed up the likes of Chris Davies, Ryan Mason, Matthew Wells to kind of, and Mile Jedinak to put on. They are raving about it. They're enjoying themselves while learning stuff. And I love the fact that we kind of thought, this crazy Postecoglou football is going to be so attacking, it's going to be like 6-5 and all that. And they've kept 2 clean sheets in the last 2 games when they've had their proper centre-backs together. It's funny the way it's working. But honestly, if you're Brennan Johnson, you're asking around, people will be raving about. And let's not say Thomas Frank is terrific. Every time I'm in a Thomas Frank press conference after Spurs have played, I'm always very impressed by him. But yeah, let's see what these coming days brings. As I said, could publish this, and moments after I publish it, there could have been another little kind of movement on it. I'm sure it will go back and forth all over the place. But for me, I think Spurs have to get this one done if they want to kind of show Postecoglou, I guess, that he's being as backed as they possibly can as well. As long as the money isn't just absolutely daft and silly and even out of keeping with this crazy summer window. But still, it's a player he wants. And then we've got the centre-back one. I'm intrigued to see where that goes, because the Tosin Adarabioyo kind of links started to kind of die off a little bit, and I'd spoken to people around that potential deal, and the suggestion were that Spurs, there hadn't really been much contact in the recent week and a half or so, and I'd imagine a lot of that was to do with the Monaco situation, because it was clear that Adarabioyo wanted to go to Monaco if they could do a deal with Fulham, because I think presumably because he would play more regularly there. And then that was a bit of to and froing. There was Fulham interest in some Spurs players. There was talk of Dyer, there was talk of Reguilon. And then I guess maybe Fulham were looking at, could we throw Adarabioyo, who's in the last year of his contract, into that situation? So yeah, I don't think that door is closed entirely at this moment, but if Monaco come in and they come in strong and they get the deal agreed, I would imagine he would go there. If they don't, then maybe that door does remain open for Spurs. There's Pershores as well, Torino, ironically, as I am in Torino right now. He's been linked, although that's kind of sounds like that's gone a bit quiet as well. It all does lead me to wonder whether there's someone else that's going to suddenly come out of the woodwork in these last couple of days. You'd say the model or the prototype, the profile for a Postecoglou centre-back is going to be someone that's very comfortable on the ball, someone who isn't a slouch. They don't have to be ultra speedy like a Van de Ven, but they've got to have the ability to chase back and be able to get that ball when it's knocked over the flanks, whether it's knocked down the middle. The centre-back's the one that maybe there's a little bit less known about right now, because they were kind of clear that Adarabioyo and Schurz were two of the main kind of candidates being looked at, but I do wonder whether there's someone else yet to come out in that situation for that position. And who knows what happens late in the window as well. You know, whether there's another midfielder that comes in because of the Højbjerg situation, whether they do at the last moment, there's a number 9 type that comes up and they just think, do you know what? For that price, even if it's just someone in rotation, a competition, whatever, we'd kind of be daft not to. You'll hear me say this every window. Every window, there's the players that they really want to go out there, they want to get, and they're early ones that are brought in. They make sure of it. So you've got I guess in this window, James Maddison is probably your shining example of that, the player that they wanted. And then you have people like Vicario, who was high up on the list. It was either Raya or Vicario. They decided on Vicario, who's been very good. Let's be honest. I do wonder whether some of the people that were so upset about Raya going to Arsenal have now maybe slightly revised things with Vicario. I hope so, because I do think he's going to be a very good goalkeeper for Spurs. And then Van de Ven as well. You know, Van de Ven, there seemed to be an idea of him and Tapsoba were the two key main targets earlier on, and Van de Ven maybe seen as the one with the highest ceiling. That was what I kept kind of being told. Obviously, he's slightly younger as well. Both very good, and both would have fitted perfectly, I think, into the Postecoglou back line. But yeah, so they're one set, the ones you go for quite early on. Then you've got the ones that you've also got on your list and you're hopeful of, but you know the kind of market has to move a little bit before you can go there. And then there's the third bunch, which is the opportunity ones, which players suddenly become available that you didn't expect. Which players' value drops. They were always on your list, but they always felt it was too much to do a deal right now for them, and then suddenly their price plummets for some reason. And those are the players that you suddenly see come out of the woodwork. And there are plenty of those that we never actually hear about that don't get done in the end. And maybe years later, one of them will come out and go, oh yeah, by the way, I almost joined Spurs that year. There's so many of those that just don't happen. I've been told by many people working, this is various clubs, I've been told this from people that work in various clubs about things drawn up for players that never ended up being signed. You know, things to go on websites, things to go out on social media. And again, I should stress, this isn't just Spurs, this is lots of different clubs. The transfers that never happened, as it were. So we shall see what in terms of incomings. I do think, as excited as we are about the incomings, the outgoings are still such a massive part of this transfer window for Spurs. They're just huge now. There's so many to get out the door. You know, Hugo Lloris got to find his club. Got to work out where he's going, and that's got to line up with Spurs. We still haven't kind of had confirmation on that yet, exactly where that's going to end up being. Jed Spence, I saw, I know I've heard of the Leeds United interest, and I saw that was out there again today. All I would say on that is very early days, very, very early days on that. And whether that one happens or not, we will see. But yeah, I'd temper that one slightly in terms of it. I'd just use that expression, is probably the best one. Very early days. It would be a good move for me, for Jed Spence. I think joining Joe Rodon at Leeds, I think the ability to go out there, play in the Championship for a club with an amazing history, who, let's be honest, really will be aiming to come back into the Premier League. And if you can impress in a Championship season there, then the likelihood is if they go up, they probably will make a bid to keep him permanently. So I actually think that's a great transfer. And as I've said before, there wasn't any interest Premier League wise for Jed Spence. There was a little bit in Italy, but mostly Championship. I think if he can get his head around the fact of going to the Championship, Leeds is, I think the same with Joe Rodon. I think he's looked at that and just thought a Premier League club in the Championship, and it won't be long. I think the same with Harry Winks went to Leicester. I think when you can get your headspace out of the idea of I must play in the Premier League, I think suddenly doors can open up for you, and that would be a terrific move for Jed Spence. But again, let's see. I think there's a lot to do to make that one happen from all sides. Tanguy Ndombele. Tanguy, we'll see. We'll see with Tanguy where that late interest comes from. I think there'll be a few clubs that will chance their arm with him. It just, I guess, is whether he agrees to it and whether Spurs just end up agreeing to anything to try and get a little bit of wages off the wage list, the salary list. I saw a suggestion today that maybe PSG have looked at him in previous windows and would maybe look again. That you'd think would be ideal for him. Going back to Paris, obviously didn't play there, but he grew up. I'm mixing him up with Serge Aurier. I'm trying to remember back to my two interviews. I sat down with both of them. They told me about their childhoods, and I'm trying to remember whether Tanguy told me whether he was. I know definitely Serge Aurier grew up in the suburbs of Paris. I'm trying to remember if Tanguy did as well. It was so long ago. Either way, I think that would probably be a good move for him. I think any move would be a good move for Tanguy right now, just to get out there, play football. I saw that Postecoglou was asked about him while I was away. It would have been after the game at Bournemouth, and essentially just said, he's in the boat with, I think, a fair few of those players who are looking to see what their next move is. Davinson Sanchez, I think he's the one there'll be a fair bit of interest in, but I would also say he's the one out of those three, the centre-backs, Eric Dyer, Japhet Tanganga and him, who I still think fits the Postecoglou system the best, and I'd be most kind of wary of letting go, but then I also appreciate he's in the last 9-10 months of his contract. So keep an eye on Big Dav. Eric Dyer as well. What happens there? Like I said before, he's not desperately pushing for a move. Quite happy to stay and fight for his place. But Spurs, obviously, again, the contract situation. Will he play? I'm sure Eric Dyer, from what I understand, would go out on a loan move if it was the right one. But a loan move is no real good for Spurs unless they ditch a load of just to ditch a bit of salary, because then he would go for free next summer, unless they could get him to agree to a year extension. But then would they want to do that? This is the problem with Spurs, is allowing players to get into this contract space where they haven't actually got that long left, because it puts all the power back into the players' hands and absolutely stuffs Spurs. Japhet Tanganga has definitely been interest there from Luton. I'd imagine there might be another couple of Premier League teams looking at him, and obviously with his representatives being Italian based, then you've also got Italian clubs kind of keeping an eye on him as well. And then the Sergio Reguilon seems to be interest from Fulham, and there's been some talk about Man U as well, which should be a really interesting one for him. And then you've got Højbjerg, of course, Pierre-Emile Højbjerg. Atletico Madrid, we know, have been very interested in him. I saw some talk just before I kind of came on here about Man United, again, looking at him potentially. I'm a bit torn when it comes to Pierre-Emile Højbjerg, because I kind of feel like he's maybe a little bit underrated slightly by Spurs fans. I think he's more consistent and can be a very good Premier League midfielder than a lot of people think. I think Postecoglou's not realising that, because I'm sure he knew that he's a good player, but I think certainly he's been bringing him on the last few games, and Højbjerg's been coming in and doing a really good job, and just seeing out the matches using all of his experience, and also showing what a professional he is as well. He's not starting matches. I asked Postecoglou about him on Friday just before I came away, and said about, how's he been behind the scenes? He's not only not starting matches, but he's also not part of the captaincy group, which he was, part of that leadership group before. And he said, you know what, he's been absolutely brilliant. He's working really hard. But then he went into this nice kind of thing about you need change at football clubs. And sometimes it's not saying it's going to be better or worse, but you need change if you're going to provoke a different kind of outcome. And like you said, it could be a worse outcome, but you've got to try these things. And that's partly why, Højbjerg's come out of the team. And to be fair to Spurs, they've done very well without him in the starting lineup, but he has come in and played a part. And I do wonder if he went to Man U, whether that would suit him quite nicely. And he would be quite good there. Maybe Spurs, I don't want to say they would regret letting him go, but would you regret strengthening a rival potentially for a top 4, top 6 spot? That's my only take on that one. But ultimately, again, last 2 years of his contract. If they kind of let him run it down to that last year, then you get into the same situation we're talking about Dyer and Sanchez. So I do feel with him, they're looking for a good fee that kind of is worthy of a player who has that status in the Premier League, but also going to be slightly wary of the fact that, yes, his contract situation is going to start knocking him towards that dodgy area. I saw a guest, he did a piece while I was away, he looked up some of the stats for Højbjerg against Bournemouth. Successful 40 of his 43 passes, made 4 passes into the final third, 3 recoveries, and he won 3 of his 4 ground duels. And I think he was only on for, wasn't that long, was it 15 minutes or so? Maybe slightly longer. I had a bit of the way I was trying to watch the game, it was kind of cutting it in and out. So I watched large portions of the game, but there were little bits and pieces I missed, which is why I had to go back to Guesty's kind of stuff that he'd written just to kind of confirm anything that I'd seen. And then the players that have gone since I did my last video, Troy Parrott's gone to Excelsior Rotterdam, which is a good move for him. I think he needs to prove that he can score goals, and hopefully he will do that now. Score goals as a senior player. We've seen him do it kind of at the youth levels for Spurs. He came off the bench for just 4 minutes against Fortuna Sittard at the weekend. Got his first Eredivisie minutes in the bank, and hopefully he'll get many more and start getting on the score sheet. That's the final thing for him. I think he's shown that he can handle the physical side of, Championship football, certainly. Now it's about showing that he can bring his finishing and his ability to show the right movement and get the goals. I think that's it. And now if he can have a good season at Excelsior, then he comes back next summer and he can say, Mr. Postecoglou, have a look and see what I can do for you now. And then it will be a decision to make for the club. Alfie Devine has gone to Port Vale, League One. Again, that's a good move for him. I know sometimes I see people on social media saying, why are they not going to Championship? They're Championship level. I think the key thing for any young player is to play regularly. And you'll see that with Spurs. Pretty much most of their young players' first loan move is League 2 or League 1. And that is to make sure they get a lot of game time. Doesn't always work. Niall John went to Charlton, got barely, I don't even know if he got a minute of senior football. But on the whole, it does work. And Alfie, I saw, came straight off the bench, 14 minutes against Carlisle for Port Vale's. I think they won 1-0 at home at the weekend. So that one's already got him some minutes. And I think I'd be interested to see where he plays there. Whether he plays as a centre midfielder or whether Postecoglou kind of putting him out on the wing. And he's done that a couple of times in the academy, mostly when they're changing about the team during the game. But I wonder whether he'll end up at the wing at Port Vale. We'll have to see. Hopefully, if they can kind of got some games, especially with no European football this season, if Port Vale have some games closer to home, I might kind of drop by and try and watch him live. Because like Alfie, sat down with him on the tour for a good interview with him, and I really hope he does well. So that's that. Very quickly now, just kind of summing up the match quickly, because like I say, I've probably watched a good 65, 70 minutes of it, just intermittent cutting out. But obviously saw 2 lovely goals. First goal, really good play from Basuma, then Pap Matassar's really incisive pass. James Maddison doing that kind of run that he's really been working on and set himself to try and score. It was a lovely goal. Honestly, that's the kind of football that we all want to see at Tottenham Hotspur. And then the second goal was lovely as well. Even Perisic again making an impact down the left-hand side after coming on. Played doggy down the left-hand side. 1-2 with Sonny, really nice 1-2. Showed kind of real grit, battling strength to get to the touchline, pull it back. Kulusevski, I thought it was a really kind of, I don't think people noticed how good a finish that was. It was the only way he could have hit that to get it into the net. And the relief on his face when he scored, you could see that that opened a lot of emotions, which was great. And then Sonny came running in and almost decapitated him with a flying kind of, it was like he was trying to get on his shoulders, but yeah, it was just brilliant. It was just pure euphoria from them all because they knew essentially that had seen out the game. And again, as I pointed out before, another low cross. That is the biggest element of the Postecoglou game, and attacking wise. And just a few takeaways from the game. Udogie, brilliant again. I know he got a bit of a bang, came off for Ben Davies towards the end, but Postecoglou seemed to indicate afterwards he was fine, just kind of knocked the ground, I think he said. So yeah, what an amazing start from a 20-year-old in his first 3 games in the Premier League. He's been phenomenal. I tweeted out today, again, when we talk about ceilings and potential, it's huge. He can be as good as he wants to be because defending-wise and strength, he's shown how good he is in the Premier League. But attacking-wise, he's a threat every time he gets forward. And he's got this partnership with Son that is blossoming right now. So yeah, fantastic for him. I think that was a big moment for Kulusevski. I felt there's been games where he's dropped off the pace a little bit, but then suddenly has come as the game has gone on. He's got better and better and better, but hasn't been rewarded maybe with a goal. Or he's had one assist that was slightly deflected, wasn't it? But he just maybe needed that one moment, and that was it, hopefully, for him as well. And Sarr, that beautiful assist as well, and obviously James Maddison's first goal in the Premier League for Tottenham Hotspur, or the first goal for Tottenham Hotspur. I noticed in the presser, with me not being there, watching on from afar, Tom Barkley got the Ange humour. I think Tom asked him, being £45 million when all the other players out there are like 100 million, so that's a bargain, isn't it? It's got to be the bargain in summer. And Ange, of course, said, a £45 million bargain, I don't know what world you live in, mate. And then with a big grin, and then said, I know what you mean, though. Relatively so. There wasn't anyone happier than me when we got him. I was delighted. I wouldn't say I'm surprised, but I'm overjoyed at the footballer I've got. The way he's embraced the whole club, where he's at in his life. He really wants to be the person. He's that creative force for us. He works hard. He wins the ball back, presses. It's not like he just comes to life when we've got the ball. He's had a disrupted week. Because don't forget that, yeah, Maddison went off in a protective boot after the game against Man U. There were some doubts of whether he would be able to play. And not only did he play, he was man of the match. Says a lot about him. He said he's had a disrupted week. He's only had 1 session with us. But for him to put on a performance like that is credit to him. And I think there's more to come. When he gets more understanding with our forward players and they get more understanding with him, he's going to keep improving. If we got him in the bargain bin, that's great for us. Ange is getting his media shtick down really well in terms of the Tottenham kind of journalist. You just kind of find yourself just listening to. He's got this fascinating way about him in a press conference. I don't know if people watch the full press conferences, you'll probably see this, but when we're asking questions, he looks utterly bored. He's either like this or he's like this. And then as soon as the question ends, sometimes he'll have a little kind of funny little witty thing he wants to say, and then he comes alive and he gives a really interesting, absorbing answer. Honestly, we are absolutely all kind of like that. It's fascinating because I think, when we look back and the managers Spurs have had, and Conte and Mourinho and these people that can kind of have the charisma to really kind of draw in a room, Postecoglou's up there in that sense. He really is. As someone that is reporting on so many of these different managers, had to ask them so many questions and listen to their answers, with Postecoglou, you really find yourself kind of drawn into what he's saying. And I think that's why when he went on in the studio and did the TNT sports stuff, I think that was maybe just showed a bigger audience of kind of what we're seeing. He's very relaxed. That guy was putting his microphone up his top and he said, introduce yourself first, mate, kind of thing. And it's just, he's got a very kind of dry wit. But most of all, and this is the key, it always is for me whenever I'm asking questions of managers, is that they give me a really interesting, insightful answer. I want to learn more about the process behind the scenes. That's why I ask the questions I do. You'll know my questions. They're not the normal ones that probably most national journalists are looking for their angle of something they want to write. Mine are more, I want to know slightly behind the scenes processes, how things are going with a certain player or whatever. And I've found with Postecoglou, to be fair, every manager barring maybe Nuno I've been able to get that from them. With Nuno, it was a struggle, let's be honest, and I did disappoint him frequently with my questions, as he would publicly say. But with Postecoglou, I feel like I get nice, long, interesting, involved answers, and I did that again on Friday. Got 3 really good answers about various things, and that's all I can ask as a journalist. And I think as readers and listeners, I'd hope that the Spurs fans kind of enjoy his answers as well. And that's not just the funny stuff, but actually the way he talks about the club. I mean, after the game the other day, he's talking about how, he's just so happy to be at the club. He's so delighted to be within this club. And he said at one point, it's like he's just living the dream. How long have we waited to hear that from any manager? For a long time at Tottenham Hotspur. Most managers, they don't look like they've been living the dream. They look like they've woken up in a nightmare and suddenly found themselves at Hotspur Way. He just comes across as a guy that is genuinely loving what he's doing. It comes across in his work. It comes across in the football he wants the players to play. He wants them to love what they're doing. He wants them to live the dream. And that's what we're all getting to do. And I think that's why the fans are absolutely buying into it. And that's huge for his football. And again, this start, I wouldn't say it's been surprising, but I think it's probably been slightly less rocky than he expected it was going to be, especially after that mess of a pre-season. But the fact that I think even, and this is a big leap, but bear with me, I think even if Spurs had lost a couple of those first 3 games, if the football had been as it was, I think the fans would still be behind him. I think the fans would see where it's going. But as it is, they're unbeaten. They've got 7 points from 3 games. Those fans, they were singing, "We've got our Tottenham back." That's incredible where we were at to where we are now. It's brilliant, let's be honest. It's where we all wanted the football to go. It's what Daniel Levy promised, let's be honest. He promised all of us before Nuno, that they were going to bring that kind of football back to the club. And we got Nuno. And then we got Antonio Conte. That football did not arrive. It has finally arrived, 2 years later. And it's beautiful. It's absolutely brilliant. Again, the game at the weekend, just the ability to control the game, the ability to just suddenly pull apart the opposition defence at will. But most of all as well, I think you've really got to look at the defence and how they played as well. We mustn't overestimate kind of how well that defence is lining up together right now. Romero and Van de Ven have not conceded a goal together while they've been on the pitch at the same time. Van de Ven, I've been so impressed with. Again, my thoughts on some of the criticism I saw of him after the first game, which I found bewildering. And I think he's just growing with every game and understanding, like I said, same with Vicario behind him, understanding what your teammates are going to do. It's such a simple and obvious thing, but that is a major part. It is like in any workplace, you need to know exactly what your role is and how it affects other people and how what they do affects you. And Van de Ven, under pressure, he's very, very good, very composed. He's only young. What is he, 22 years old? He knows what to do with the ball. He knows he's also got the skill and pace to get out of situations. He's starting to learn that link up with Romero. I think Romero is playing superbly at the moment as well. Technically, it was a big challenge from him that set away, I think it was the one that Richarlison kind of, we'll talk about Richarlison in a second, but Richarlison maybe could have put away and didn't. I think Romero Van de Ven, it's a lovely looking partnership in terms of they're complementing each other with different aspects of their game. Romero, the brute force allied with, a little bit of that Argentinian flair and skill on the ball. Van de Ven, all about the kind of the skill and the pace, but also he's such a big guy as well. And that's actually was one area that he's got to work on, is his aerial side to the game. But I think that will come, and he can just use his frame and size to be dominant. He and Romero, and when you've got Doggy absolutely flying down the left, you've got Pedro Porro doing very well on the right-hand side as well, and really flying underneath the Postecoglou kind of banner, which is terrific of him. I actually guessed he got together some Van de Ven stats for you. 95% pass success rate, bearing in mind the amount of pressure Bournemouth tried to put him under. 69 successful passes from 73. One dribble out of defence, 2 passes into the final third, 7 clearances, 4 recoveries, 1 block, 1 interception, and he won all 3 of his ground duels. Superb. That's all you can ask for. And again, like I said, Vicario, I thought very solid again. Did everything else to him. Another clean sheet to his name. That's brilliant for him. Elsewhere, I've got to talk about Richarlison. Richarlison, I didn't think he was that bad first half. I thought first half he was okay. I thought he did a lot of good things in what he had to do. And I think a lot of the play revolved around him because of that. His hold-up play was good. But then just something happened as the game wore on. Second half, honestly, he was just having a nightmare. His confidence had drained from him. There was that moment when he tried to run through, like stood on the ball, and it just went, very, very wrong. And obviously that moment where he did really well. I think he nutmegged the defender. Was it nutmegged the defender or nutmegged the keeper? Nutmegged someone anyway. Got into the box and then had to just kind of push the ball into the net, and it just someone else came in at the same time. There was a touch of misfortune to it, but it's just those sliding doors moments. If he gets that goal, I think everything changes. I think his whole demeanour changes, his confidence changes, and I think he got booked, didn't he, after the one where he stood on the ball because he kind of swiped out at the player who was running away from him with the ball. Richarlison. My thoughts are mixed on him. They really are. Obviously, Richarlison has never been a prolific goal scorer. That isn't something that his game has been about. The most goals he scored is 13 in a season, which isn't bad, but it's not a prolific goal scorer. Could he be in a Postecoglou system with chances constantly flying in there for him, more so than he would have ever had at Everton? Maybe. Can he be very effective for Postecoglou? Yes, I think he can. Does he have to have the confidence to do so? Absolutely. And I think that's the key thing for Richarlison now. Even if the ball goes into the net off his backside in one of these coming games, just something to remind him of kind of how good he can be. Again, he is Brazil's number 9. He cannot be a bad player at all. He is a good player. He's just drained of confidence right now, and he knows he is trying to replace one of the best players, best strikers in the world, probably the best number 9 in the world, and he is having to do that right now. And you can understand it is weighing heavy on his shoulders, as is the £60 million price tag. And I do think the prospect of Son playing through the middle is another thing as well. Richarlison's got to clearly kind of find his confidence somehow, whether it is through a bit of luck or anything. And Postecoglou said himself that, yes, of course he'll have a chat with him if he gets to 10, 20 goals, games or whatever it is without scoring. But right now it's just about him working hard, and he'll work his way through it, as any player really has to. We'll see. But I understand again why people want further competition for him. But I do think Son is that competition. That's my kind of feeling. Unless someone pops out of the woodwork suddenly late in the window as a deal that Spurs cannot turn their head away from. Talking of Son, 8 years today. What a signing when you look at it. All of those wonderful goals he scored, and so many goals. The first Asian player to score 100 goals in the Premier League. He won the Puskás Award for that incredible goal. Golden Boot as well. How can I forget that? Just a remarkable guy. Now the captain of Tottenham Hotspur. Got to go down as one of the best signings in Tottenham Hotspur history. 8 years, fantastic. Honestly, what a player. And he's just such a lovely guy as well. He's just terrific. Fulham next. Fulham tomorrow night. Or tonight, if you're watching this on Tuesday. Fulham, what to expect? It's going to be a tough game. It's probably one of those you probably wouldn't have wanted to come out of the draw, but it's just the way it goes. Unfortunately, that is just the way it can throw anything at you. These cup draws, and Fulham away is not probably the one that anyone would have picked, especially in such an early round while it's still regionalised as well. But it would be a good test to see how much he rotates Postecoglou. I think he has to. I think he said himself, to suddenly throw these players after a bit of a naff pre-season into 3 games in a week is too much. I think he said that he's going to try to change key areas where he needs fresh legs, I think, more than anything, without taking away the momentum of the team. So, yeah, let's see what that means, whether that means Lo Celso comes in, whether that means Højbjerg comes in, even Oliver Skip, I guess, into the midfield. There could be any of those, or all three. And then maybe a Davinson Sanchez or an Eric Dyer at the back. And then up front, you know, the likes of Manor Solomon have got to get a chance at some point as well. So, yeah, let's see what happens. But as I say, this was always going to be a bit of a shorter one. It's just literally with the little bit of time I had, I was going to throw something out there. Again, apologies if it dates very quickly and there's stuff that supersedes it quite quickly, maybe even before it's published. But I just thought I'd put something out there to explain some of the little bits and pieces that I've been hearing and some thoughts on that game. So yeah, I'm going to head off now. I'd imagine the next video probably won't be until after that, unless I get any time in the next few days, which is maybe unlikely at this point. Otherwise, it's going to be looking back on the transfer window that was. Yeah, we'll see. Hopefully, fingers crossed, the next time I'm speaking to you, we've got some really exciting stuff to talk about that happened. And things that we can be really positive about. But let's be honest, I think we can be pretty positive about what's happened thus far, and anything else would just kind of really push on what Ange Postecoglou is trying to do and make it even more effective, because I'm really liking what we've seen so far. So right, gonna head off now. As always, stay healthy, stay safe, look after yourselves. I shall catch you later. Goodbye.